is nothing more frustrating than reaching for a fresh planner insert only to find bent corners and curled pages because they've been loose in a drawer or desk organizer. Plus, if you can't locate the insert you have on hand, your planner system stops working. Today, I'm showing you a simple, fast way to build functional cardstock storage pockets that cost almost nothing to make. But they'll protect your pages and they'll keep all your inventory perfectly organized. No fuss, no complicated crafting. Let's build a system that actually works. The supply list for these pockets is fairly short. First, you will need heavyweight cardstock, 80 pounds, 216 GSM. I'm using 12 by 12 inch paper today. For larger pockets, you would need that size, but for some of the smaller pockets, you might be able to use 8.5 by 11 or smaller. You'll also need a pair of scissors, and you'll need some glue. If you happen to be a paper crafter and have a scoring board like this, I'd recommend using it. But if not, you'll need a ruler, a pencil, a piece of scrap cardboard like from a cereal box, and a dinner knife from your kitchen. I'll show you both a workaround for when there's no scoring board available and with the scoring board. So the first step is to determine the size of the pocket you want to make. I need to make another pocket that will hold the monthly and weekly pages from my planner that I don't keep in my planner all the time. I only keep about 3 months in there at once. So I want to make a pocket for these. I want them to go into the pocket this way so that the tabs are at the top of the pocket. And I want my tabs to be a little bit protected. I usually make just a quick small sketch for myself, but I went ahead and created a nice large one so that you can see it better. This square is our 12 by 12 sheet of paper, and this gray rectangle represents the 7 by 9.25 inch planner page. I've added an extra 1/4 inch up at the top for the divider tabs. The width is 9.25, but I want a little bit of ease on the sides of it, so I've added an extra 1/4 inch. So between these two dashed lines is actually 9.5 inches. And from the top edge to the first dashed line would be 7.25 inches. I want my pocket to be 1/2 inch deep, so I have a 1/2 inch here and a 1/2 inch here, and I'll need another 1/2 inch down here for the bottom of the pocket. Then we need to figure out what this leftover piece on the sides of our 12 inch paper would be so that we can divide that in half and we'll know where to put our score lines. So we have 12 inches minus the 9.5 inches minus the 2 1/2 inch areas. So that's 12 inches minus 10.5 inches, or 1.5 inches. So that would be 3/4 of an inch on either side. So we're going to score at 3/4 of an inch. And then this is a 1/2 inch over, so this would be 1 1/4 inches. And then we can actually rotate our paper around and we'll score at the same measurements on the other side. Now the score line is going to be measured from the top, so it measures at 7.25 inches. And then this line we add another 1/2 inch, so it would be at 7.75 inches. So now that we know where our score lines are on our first piece of paper. Now if you don't have a scoreboard, here's an easy workaround using the things that you likely have handy. We'll take our 12 by 12 inch piece of paper and our ruler. And this is the top and this is the bottom. So I'm going to put that down here so I remember. We want to measure over from this side 3/4 of an inch and 1.25 inches. So I'm going to line up my ruler along the edge of the paper so that I know my ruler is straight. And I'm going to put a little mark here at 3/4 of an inch and another little mark at 1.25 inches. And then I'm going to come over to the other end and do the same thing. 3/4 of an inch and 1.25. Now I'm going to turn my paper around and I'm going to do the same thing along the top edge. There's 3/4 and 1.25, and 3/4 and 1.25. Now we're going to measure from the top and mark each side. We need to measure at 7.25 and 7.75. And then I'll turn it around and measure from the top on the other side. 7.25 and 7.75. Okay, now we're ready to score those lines. Place the paper on top of the piece of cardboard, then take the ruler and line it up with the first pair of little marks. Then we're going to use the dinner knife. We are not going to use the serrated edge, the cutting edge. We're going to use the back edge because we don't want to damage our paper. We just want to press really firmly against it and create an indentation. The purpose of the cardboard is so that we have something to press the paper into that will give just enough to indent the paper. What happens when we create that indentation is that the paper fibers get stretched a little at the line we want to fold along, and this helps the paper fibers bend instead of break when we fold and crease along the scored lines. Now, this is probably hard to see, but I think you can see a little indentation there in the paper. You have to press really, really hard with this method. Not so hard that you tear your paper, but hard enough that you do get a nice groove. Then we're going to turn it around and we'll do the same thing on this side over here. You have to hold your ruler down really firm so that it doesn't shift. And I'm running over it twice just to make sure I get as good a score line as possible. And then we turn the paper and score the ones across the bottom of the pocket. And we just do the same thing again. We're going to line it up, score across our paper, okay, now we've scored all our lines, so let me get this out of the way, and we can start to very carefully fold the paper over at the score line. You want to get a really good crease, so if your knife has sort of a rounded edge on the handle that you can use that to press along the folded edge and get a nice crisp crease. And I do the same thing on the second fold, so there's the bottom creases. Now we're going to do the sides. So we're just keep repeating the process. Carefully fold and then crease. Fold and crease. Fold and crease. Obviously, now we're going to have to make a few cuts in order to be able to get this to fold like a box. We want to make the cuts down here where the bottom of the pocket is created. So we're going to cut along this crease line and this crease line. And then we're going to cut here and make a little tab that will be glued in to make the bottom of the pocket nice and sturdy. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. So I'll take my scissors. It's a little hard for you to see where these lines are. I'm going to take a pencil and highlight the creases a little so that you can see where I'm cutting. So I'm going to come up to that crease that's at the bottom of the pocket, and then I'm going to cut along that crease up to the bottom of the pocket. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to cut it off out here and leave that little tab. Sometimes it goes together a little easier if you cut just a little bit off the sides right there on the tab. It takes a little of the bulk out. And then I'll just turn it around and do the same thing on this side. Now let's fold this in to see how our pocket is coming along. This is what it would look like so far. And because my pages are taller and I do want to protect them because they're going to be stored in this for a while, I want this to be higher on the front. So what I need to do is cut another piece of paper. To figure out how wide a piece I need, I take my ruler and measure. I like to have about an inch overlap with the other piece so that it's very stable. And I want to go up about an inch and a half, or an inch or a half inch below the top. So I'm thinking a 3.5 inch strip is a good number. I forgot to mention a paper trimmer in the supply list. And if you don't have one, you can measure like we did to create the score lines. But instead of scoring, draw a line and cut along it with your scissors. I do have several paper trimmers, so I'm just going to pull one of those out and quickly cut a strip of 12 by 3.5 inch cardstock. And I'm going to need to score it the same as we did on the other one at the sides. And that was at 3/4 and 1 1/4. and then 3/4 and 1 1/4 again. And then of course 3/4 and 1 1/4 and 3/4 and 1 1/4. And then I'll very quickly score, fold, and crease this. There we have our add-on piece to make the front taller. There's one more thing I like to do before we start gluing this together. When you have these little square corners sticking up at the top like this, they seem to get bent and dog-eared quickly. And this additional piece of paper isn't going to cover those up. So I'm going to round them off. Now you may have a corner rounding paper punch, or you could use something small and round like a dime and create a little curved line to trim along, but I'm just going to eyeball it and round them off with my scissors. Now we're ready to start gluing. I'm going to erase my little reminder of which edge was the bottom. Pencil lead sometimes transfers to other surfaces, and we don't want that. It can be helpful to fold this front piece back away from the pocket so that you can reach those tabs and get those glued in place first. The glue that I like to use is Barely Art glue. This big bear is a refill bottle. You start out with a small bottle that has a precision tip, but I got this glue press a couple of years ago, and I have filled one of the bottles that fit it with the Barely Art glue. It doesn't take lots of glue for this. It grabs fairly quickly and it dries clear, which is always a good thing. So I get a little glue on our tabs, and I'm just going to fold that up and hold it in place. It's important to make sure you're keeping everything square and aligned. And then do the same thing on the other side. Get it all squared up. And it just takes it a few seconds to start to grab. If you can put pressure on both sides, that does help. So now we need to glue this lower front piece, and I'm going to put a little mark on each side so I know where the glue needs to go. Okay, so we want to put glue on this piece, and we want to get fairly close to the edge so that it will spread to the edge and make a nice seal there and hold well. And then we do the same thing on this one, because when we fold this down, both sides are going to come down at the same time. You want to fold it down and get it squared up against those sides and hold it there for a second. And then you can take your ruler and run it inside the pocket and apply a little bit of pressure from underneath and against the side too. You just want to keep that side nice and square. Turn it over and it's easier to press it down this way. Now we can put glue on this entire area and wrap it around the side and to the back. And then we'll fold that up, hold it in place for a second, run the ruler back in there and apply some pressure. And then I'll turn it around and I'll do the same thing on this side. Make sure to get glue near the corners and close to the edges so that they don't stick up later. It's looking pretty good so far. We just need to get the extra front piece on here that goes right about here. So I'm going to give myself some little mark, then I'll just try and cover them up when I put it in place. We're going to glue all the way across here and up the side, but we need to have glue down here all the way across. And then on this piece, I'm going to put a little bit of glue down here along this bottom edge to make sure it sticks down well. And then I'm going to put glue here all the way up. Now I'm reminding myself as I'm putting this glue down without any line to follow that the width I'm gluing is 3/4 of an inch, just like the part of this that wraps around at the back. So I can sort of use that as a visual guide. I'm going to turn this around and try and line up those marks and just cover them up. Now I'll flip it over so that I can press down on it, which is easier than pressing up against it. And I'm going to keep checking that the sides are squared up so the pocket will work properly. It feels like it's a little tight on one side, like maybe I'm a little bit off. Hopefully I've got just enough time before my glue completely sets to shift it over a tiny bit. Okay, I got it lined up a little bit better. Now we just need to glue these pieces that wrap around. And here we are. We have a pocket. Let's see if my monthly and weekly planner pages will fit. Absolutely perfect. Okay, so that's the first storage pocket. I wanted to do one that was a little larger and we need a bit of paper piecing to complete it. The next storage pocket I'm going to show you is going to be for a couple of half-width inserts that I use. Let's make a storage pocket for my weekly meal plan and running task list sheets. These are 9 1/4 inches tall, but they're 4 1/4 inches wide. I designed them to print 2 copies per sheet, and then I just figured I could cut the 8.5 paper in half and save myself a cut, so they're a tiny bit wider than a skinny classic size page. I want the pocket to be vertical this time. I want to be able to pull out from the top. So here I have another sketch for us, and this is just like before. This is our 12 by 12 sheet of paper, and this is my insert here in the gray. I wanted extra ease because it's a long insert. So I added 1/2 inch instead of just 1/4 inch this time. That makes it 4 3/4 inches between these two score lines. And then I'm good with the top of the pocket being flush with the inserts. So I left this at 9 1/4 inches for the first score line. I want the depth of this pocket to be 3/8 of an inch. I don't need as much room as I do for the monthly, weekly pages. So I have 3/8 of an inch for both sides, and then again for the bottom. Then we just need to figure out what this number is. So again, we have 12 inches minus 4 3/4 of an inch minus 2 times the 3/8 of an inch, which is 3/4 of an inch. So we're at 12 minus 5.5 inches, which means we have 6.5 inches or 3 1/4 inches on either side. So this score line is at 3 1/4, and this score line is at 3 5/8. And then we can turn it around and do the same measurements on this side. So this one from the top is 9 1/4, and this one would be at 9 5/8. Now the cool thing is, when you have a scoring board, you don't need to measure and mark your paper because your scoring boards generally have grooves every 1/8 of an inch. Now it's a bit hard to see on this one, but there is a ruler here and it's marked to 1/8 inch. This is a bone folder that I'm using for scoring. Most scoring boards come with a thinner plastic tool for scoring. I prefer using an actual bone folder for scoring and creasing. So we need to score at 3 1/4. So there's 3 1/4. And then we score again at 3 5/8. And I do usually score twice on heavy cardstock, even with a scoring board. So now let's turn it around and we'll score the other side at 3 1/4 and at 3 5/8. Now we'll turn it and we'll score at 9 1/4 from the top. So there's 9 1/4, and then again at 9 5/8. And just like that, we have done all our scoring. So now it's time to take and fold all of our score lines and crease them. I'm going to use my bone folder to press the crease this time. And then I'll do the same thing here. That takes care of the bottom folds. Now let's do the sides. And there's all of our folds done. So now we're going to do those very same cuts, and I'll mark them on the sketch again. We're going to come down here where the bottom of our pocket is, and we're going to cut that crease from the side over to the bottom and that crease over to the bottom, and then we're going to cut out here to leave us a little tab, and then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We're going to cut along that crease and along that crease, and then leave ourselves a little tab. Okay, so let's do that with my scissors. I'm going to cut right into that crease line, the other crease line, and then I'm going to leave a little tab. And then turn around to the other side and do the same. Now let's fold this one up like we did before and take a look at it, see how it's going to turn out. We started with a 12-inch wide piece of paper, and our pocket is only 4 3/4 inches wide, so the pieces that fold around overlap, which will make it very sturdy. But because there is an overlap, it doesn't give us any space up here to peek into the pocket or any ease for being able to reach in and pull out a page. So what I like to do is create some sort of cutout here. I don't like to cut from the corner because it makes a side weak. So I'm going to make a little mark about a 1/2 inch over from the side. And then I like to have a dip for access that's about 1 inch or so deep on a pocket this tall. So I'll make a pencil mark over here. Oops, I measured that one on the top for the wrong crease. Let me mark that again at 1/2 inch. So what I want to do is sort of round this off up here a little bit, and then I could just go at an angle toward my 1 inch mark, or you can give it a curve. But I'm feeling like making a curve on this one, so I'm going to sort of flatten it out here so that it will meet nicely and give us a low enough dip. So here's my curve. I'm going to round this off down here too, and then we won't have a little corner that might poke up. Then I'm just going to trim along that line with my scissors very carefully. Then I can use the little piece I cut off to make the same curve on the other side. And then I'll carefully cut along that line. And I'll erase any stray pencil marks that might have been left behind. Now let's fold up our pocket and see how it's coming along now. So this is what our front looks like. We'll be able to see what's in there and be able to reach in and easily pull one out. Now, I'll do one more little thing here. I want to know where I need to put glue on this overlap area, so I'm going to give myself a little mark down here so I know not to put glue outside that mark. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to fold this front piece back a little bit so that I can get in here to work with these tabs. These are tiny tabs. And it's fairly tight in there. It's a thinner pocket than the last one. Oh, it's only an eighth of an inch thinner. But I gotta figure out how to get in there and hold this. And so I can hold it for a second and let it grab. Trying to get a little pressure from both sides. It is just such a little tiny spot for my big fingers to get into. It's amazing that the other one was a half an inch in depth and this one's 3/8 of an inch. That eighth of an inch difference seems huge at the moment. Okay, so now we need to glue the overlap. I can use the mark for the lower part, but I do have to sort of figure out and be careful up at the top so that I don't actually come out of the overlap. Now to get it squared up, I'm going to fold this bottom piece up and use it to help keep the pocket, the overlap pieces squared at the bottom, and then try to keep it square all the way up to the top. And then I'm going to flip it over so I can run my ruler in there on top of that, because that's a pretty big area that we got to get to grab. Then I'm going to erase that little pencil mark that I left showing. Now we just need to glue this bottom piece in place and wrap it around to the back. We could trim these and remove some of the overlap, but I'm fine with it as it is. So I'll just put glue on both the side and back area of this piece and wrap it around. And then I'm going to turn it around and do the same thing over here. And I want to be sure I get around the edges with the glue. I forgot to put glue somewhere. Now you get to learn another trick. I got caught up in whether or not to trim the overlap in the back and forgot to put glue on the front. So here's how we're going to get some glue under there. If you ever have a flap or a little corner or somewhere sticking up on something and you need to get a little glue under there, when possible, use a precision applicator and inject a little glue. But if you don't have a precision tip or it's just too tight a space to get the tip into, like over here at the edges, take a little narrow scrap of paper and put a little bit of glue on it. And then tuck it into the space you need glue. So there's a little unplanned bonus tip. Okay, so here's our storage pocket. Let's try it out with my inserts. And now here's a planned little bonus, quick to make dividers for your storage pockets. I cut cardstock to the same size as my inserts, 4 1/4 by 9 1/4, and then I just put a little adhesive divider tab on them. So now you can see how easily you can make these in whatever size you want. They will stand up if they're standing in something. At 1/4 to a 1/2 inch in depth, they usually don't have enough of a bottom to stand on their own. But if you put them in an organizer or a bin, they stand up easily. This bin is the perfect size for my planner page storage pockets. And you really can make them whatever size you need. Like you have orphan sticker sheets. You can make a pocket just the right size for your orphan sticker sheets. You can even make a pocket for your adhesive divider tabs. This was made with a 4 1/2 inch square of scrap cardstock that I happen to have. So have fun, organize and protect all your planner pages and accessories. There's a companion blog post that goes over all the details of measuring and figuring out how much paper you'll need and where to score your paper, no matter what size pocket you want. It's linked in the description, along with all of the supplies that I used in the video today. If this tutorial was helpful, please hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell because I'm all about planning that fits your life. And I love to keep sharing ideas that make your planning system easier. Tell me in the comments what size planner you're using right now. And also, what planner organization questions or problems would you like me to tackle next? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.